You can't replace part of the brain. Like, you
treat them the same.
The source of truth for the medtech industry.
Coexists with the prophets.
Robot understands things automatically.
Number one show in the medtech industry.
So Stryker got ahead of that and changed in the 90s, built $1 billion company that held up high, a lot of things.
State of MedTech with your host, Omar M. Khatib.
What's going on, everybody? And hello, Red Hat Gang. We haven't had a President's Club episode in a couple of months. I apologize. It's hard to find these. But today I'm really excited about our guest. It's a very unique President's Club episode in the sense that, when we look at the world of SaaS and enterprise SaaS, highly sophisticated, complex sales cycles and very different sales mentality than we're used to. But we're starting to see a lot of those strategies come to our space just because of the complexity of our sale. And so many of you know I have this amazing partner and sponsor, which is Showpad. Great sales enablement tool. I absolutely love them. If you want to be able to essentially use data to understand what's going to influence and persuade your customers, demonstrate products on the go and everything, Showpad is fantastic. You can learn more at showpad.com/state of MedTech. And so in my partnership with them, I talked to him. I said, hey, can you send one of your best enterprise sales leaders on the show? Because I want to learn more about that process and, bring a lot of those insights to you. And so today we're joined by Jelle, who's enterprise sales account executive. I might have messed up your title there. Is that correct?
All good, Omar. Yeah. Enterprise account executive. Yep.
So, Justin, you've won multiple President's Clubs. You've worked in SaaS and enterprise sales for a while, and so I'm excited to have you on the show. Before we kind of get into some tactics and strategies and stuff, maybe tell us a little bit about your background as a salesperson.
Yeah, Omar. First, thank you for hosting this podcast and having me on as a guest. I was looking forward to it. Have been a listener for quite some time and work with lots of medical device manufacturing organizations here at Showpad as my customers. So I've been pushing them to listen to this podcast as well.
Long time listener, first time guest, right?
Yes. Exactly.
And this is your first podcast too. And you're doing great,
Thank you. I appreciate it, Omar. Yeah. Thank you. No, I'm happy to be here. And yeah, so I guess maybe just a quick backdrop. You're right. I've been in the sort of B2B sales arena for some time. I would say sort of got my first chops in this industry at Gartner, selling to CIOs in this space. And after a number of years of successfully working in that group, was fortunate enough to move over into the sales practice. So basically myself and our teams were selling research and best practices to CROs, heads of sales enablement, and got to see firsthand the great research and insights on what does a sophisticated B2B sales organization look and feel like, and how can other organizations learn from that. And that was actually how I sort of landed at Showpad. I had the, I think, benefit of seeing all the players in the space and being able to see who was the most innovative in the sales enablement industry. And a couple of years ago, that's how I sort of landed here.
And yeah, I was going to ask you about that because what's interesting, again, working at Gartner, you saw all of the top products, tools, and everything. So leaving Gartner, you kind of had your pick of where you would like to go. What specifically about Showpad and their technology kind of stood out to you that made you say, like, yeah, I want to join this company? Because A, like, you have to really believe in the product, and B, it's got to be a great team, great market, et cetera. So what specifically kind of led you to Showpad?
Yeah, I definitely had the unfair advantage of being able to speak to our analysts, read the research, and get a peek into what customers are using the software in a variety of different sales categories. The enablement space is something that I think really caught my interest because of the ability, I think, to make a difference for sellers like myself, right? And so Showpad really caught my attention because of their innovation and sort of being first movers in this category, and being able to see the product itself from digital sales rooms, from being able to see and engage better with customers via unique and differentiated ways, was really, I think, what attracted me the most here.
Yeah, and I think, for me as a media company, what attracted me as a partner was, it made a lot of sense, because at least for a lot of my audience as sellers, you need a really versatile and dynamic tool out in the field, which Showpad has, which I love the ability to be essentially demo a product and sort of bring and immerse a physician into this world to see a product in a variety of different ways. And you can do this like on the go when you see a physician in the cafeteria, at the scrub sink, or in between cases, whatever it might be. But then I think more importantly is that there's this bridge between sales and marketing that's, been very much lacking in our industry, where sellers are able to kind of focus on what tools are going to help them the most. And then marketing can work with sellers to say, hey, like based on the data, here's what's working, here's what's not, And so I feel like it serves as a great bridge. Plus, like, interesting factoid for the audience, like, when Steve Jobs rolled out the iPad, Showpad, which is why they're called Showpad, was one of the few handful of companies where Steve Jobs personally selected and said, hey, like, we want to work with you, sort of one-on-one, in rolling these products out and everything through our app store. So that was kind of like a really cool piece of history from Showpad I didn't know about. So that being said, you've won multiple President's Clubs. You've been a successful salesperson. What do you think? I mean, let's start with sort of a basic question, which is what in enterprise sales, what makes a successful enterprise salesperson? Somebody who wins multiple President's Clubs, crushes their quota, etc. Like, what does that person look like? What do they do?
Quick commercial break for marketing leaders and sales leaders. I don't have to tell you this, but it's worth reiterating that the time clinicians have to meet with medical reps is limited. You know this and feel this. It's been a challenge for med device sellers for decades. Now, with the rising workloads and patient care demands, clinicians' times are shrinking even more. And the window for your sellers and your sales team to meet with these clinicians consists of pretty much just minutes in a busy hospital hallway. The reality is your sellers have to make every second count or someone else will. They must be concise, they got to be efficient, and use highly relevant information to make the most out of these brief interactions. Showpad is all about focusing your sellers on the art of selling, which is about building trust and relationships. And while there's science, the Showpad solution handles the behind-the-scenes prep and follow-up work to make your team more effective. The best part is that you get insights on content and training performance so you can make strategic decisions and invest more in what works based on data. Showpad helps your sales and marketing teams spend their time in more productive, high-impact ways with a multiplying effect on your revenue results and growing your pipeline. So to learn more, go to showpad.com/State of MedTech. Now, let's get back to the show.
Great question. I mean, I think in my experience as a rep and a leader in the past of reps, I think probably a couple things come to mind. First is you'll typically see folks in President's Club be the individuals who are like consistently learning and curious, right? So whether it be about the product, the industry, the market, their customers, they're genuinely curious and have like this thirst for knowledge. Like they're constantly asking their peers, their leaders for, hey, how could I get better? How could I do this better? After every demo, they're asking for feedback. So I think curiosity and like a genuine like need to get better is something that I consistently see amongst top performers. So they're always working on their craft, right? Two, I would also say that the individuals who treat their like sales process like an athlete, like their the amount of preparation that they put into pre-meetings, during meetings, post-meeting follow-up, like the attention to detail in their preparation and follow-up is, I think, what separates high performers from the others. So they typically have a system and a process that they find that works for them, and they're meticulous about their preparation around that and execution around that process.
You feel like the most of the money is made in really good follow-up?
That's a good, I would argue, right? And here's a tactic, right? Your follow-up starts in your prep. So before meeting with a clinician, before meeting with a prospect or a customer, you should have an objective of that meeting, like something that you're looking to get out of that and some value that you're looking to deliver during that meeting. And one of the things that you can do is like pre-draft your follow-up, pre-draft your text to the customer, pre-draft all of that and say, all right, if this goes well, here's what's happened. And do that all pre that meeting. And then therefore, like the follow-up is the easy part, right? It's already templatized. You're already done with that before you even have the meeting. So kind of switching that up, maybe not in the follow-up, it's in the prep.
No, I like that. I completely agree. Do you feel like most people in the sales world, at least in enterprise sale, they don't put enough emphasis on the prep and they kind of go into the meetings sort of blind and cold?
I definitely see that. And like, look, I fall into that trap, right?
Why
And,
why does that happen though?
time management is like what happens to me, right? Let's say you get, busy with current customers or busy because you've just been back to back. If you've been in the game for some time, sometimes you might think that you can, I've done this discovery type of meeting 1,000 times before, and you can let that slip and you let your discipline slip a little bit. So I would say that like time management is probably the root cause of why you don't do that.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, and I think that at least in our space, there was a time where you go in and I mean it's still like this. You go in and out of cases and stuff, but you can kind of go on the fly and sell purely based on relationships and your ability just to show up and be persistent. But as it's happened in a lot of different industries, the buying process has become a lot more complex, right? It's not that easy anymore. We talked off camera a little bit about the way that you maintain relationships, like in the digital age. For our industry, they use email a lot. They're trying to get better about social media, but at least on the enterprise sales side, how do you use relationship driven sales strategies, but in a digital world, because where people don't have as much time, etc. And especially in enterprise sales, unlike medical device sales, a lot of medical device sales, you can physically go to your customer because you're covering a case or you happen to be in the air or something. For enterprise sales, you're not meeting customers physically. So how do you guys go about maintaining those sort of relationships digitally?
Yeah, it's a great, and we started to talk about this a little bit, right? Off camera is like, the way that I started to think about this a number of years ago, and it was in some of the research that Gartner and CEB had created, which is this idea that the surface area that sellers have with their customers is shifting, right? And so if you think about like all the touches that a seller used to have with a particular customer, to your point, they can go on site, they can meet with them, they might have Zoom meetings, things like that. The seller used to be a large portion of how customers or prospective customers would learn about a solution or a product, right? It was that seller communicating that to them via meeting. Now, like things are shifting. So customers are doing their own research. They're talking to peers. They're talking to industry analysts. They are, going about learning on their own without the rep present for a good portion of the sales process, right? And so the way that I started to think about that is like, okay, if most of the selling or buying rather is happening when I'm not in the room or near a prospective customer, how can I influence that? So one of the things that you can do as a salesperson is I would highly recommend like partner up with someone in your marketing team and start to understand, right, what is a day in the life of our prospective customers, right? What do they go through? And, if you're selling to clinicians, you probably have a really good understanding of that already, but work with your marketing team to understand, right, that buying process of your particular customer and understand like what types of meetings are they having internally, where do they go to consume and learn about information. And that should be your strategy, is be in those areas with typically, right? It's going to be content. It's going to be like PDFs, interactive brochures, lots of things that you can do through Showpad that I know you're aware of, like shared spaces, those deal rooms that you can pull together and customize and help folks continue learning. Like you need to be there because the idea is you got to help your buyers like articulate and learn about your solution when you're not there. And so those are the areas that I think are becoming critical. It's the seller's job to like Sherpa them along that like journey, right?
Right.
So.
What about this? And I can hear some of my audience is that a lot of my audience, unfortunately, they don't have a good marketing department, and the compared to like the SaaS enterprise world, marketing in our space, a lot of times is like product management, and so they're not commercial people. So for the rep who's listening, who's like, yeah, my marketing department sucks, they're not going to put together anything. Like, what do you do in that situation?
Yeah. you're going to have to pull it together yourself, right? You're going to have to pull together like the resources that you need. The way that I would think about this is like, what are the types of things that your buyers are asking you for, right? Or like whether it's talking points, whether it's like imagery or PDFs or a quick 3-page slide deck, or, you know, whatever it may be, like some tech specs that they're going to need to push forward, right? To be able to pull that together themselves. Now, slight plug for Showpad, we make that process easy to pull together those bits and pieces of information and make it far more dynamic and engaging. So if you're a sales organization that, you know, maybe doesn't have a robust marketing arm, Showpad can help. I would say bridge that gap. But, you know, without that, I think there's lots of things that you can do from a rep perspective to kind of pull that in and think about the journey that your customers are on to support them.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. What about, so that's a very valid point on the deal side and increasing deal velocity. What about just on the pure prospecting side? How do you think about maintaining those, or developing those initial relationships?
So in my experience, right, and you know, I'd be curious how this translate. Yeah, it's potentially going to be different across, like if you're selling capital equipment or like maybe consumables, like a transactional type of, you know, sale, right? But in my experience, the ways in which you can sort of stand out and help with early stage deal velocity is one, having a really good hypothesis or point of view about your prospective customer's business, right? And so it's like authentically putting yourself in their shoes, like identifying who is this I'm going after Omar, runs the State of MedTech podcast. I'm going to do all my research on him. Where does he live, right? Get a sense for his career, get a sense of the individual. I'm going to look at the company that Omar's a part of, right? So what are the organization, what's going on in the organization, who they compete with, how do they sell, how do they go to market? And then we're going to look at the market itself. So I look at the person, the company, the market, identify like trends that kind of bring those all together. And when you have a really compelling like point of view on why Omar should talk to me, Justin Jelley from Showpad, you're more likely to have a better first conversation. If you have a better first conversation, you're more likely to get more stakeholders involved, have a better second. So, you know, it goes into like the point of view that you have when you actually send a note, right? Because most of it's garbage. Let's be honest. Like you and I probably get tons of emails, whether it's for jobs or just
unbelievable amount.
It's crazy, right? So like the more authentic and like having a good point of view that aligns across those dimensions, like the better you're going to be, I think, in prospecting.
When you prospect, are there tools, maybe not tools, but channels? Like when you talk about prep, how do you go about doing prep? Like, do you go and sort of check them out on LinkedIn? Like, what do you do on your own to start getting some intel? Not only when you're in your outreach, but if you have an initial meeting set up.
Yeah, great question. So, there's a couple levers I'll pull. One is, of course, LinkedIn Sales Navigator. It's almost like if you don't have that in the enterprise space, it's a tough to do your job, right? So
what features on Sales Navigator do you like love the most? Because there's a lot of features, but a lot of them I don't feel like they're useful. There's a few that I feel are. What are your favorite features on Sales Navigator?
So a couple things I'll look at. So the account intel, I don't know if you've seen the AI in that, which basically shows like key trends in things like hiring, their growth stats across departments. And like it also gives you a decent summary of like what are the corporate objectives of this particular business. It's pretty good. It's pretty good. The other thing that, of course, is going to make sense is I like to see who's new in seat in the organization, what type of hiring have they done across those departments. I also like to see, do they follow my business? Are they connected? Do I have any first, second degree connections across good contacts? So I can, somebody's connected to you, I can say, oh, great, maybe Omar has an in with this particular business. So I like to see those connections as well. So I use LinkedIn predominantly for that. And then like for the account stuff, of course, whatever CRM you're in, you want to see historical account view perspective. What's happened across this? Do we have any lost deals? Any similar businesses across the portfolio, right? And then, candidly, I've been using ChatGPT or some sort of like LLM to do like account-based research, right? And I type in some scripts around that and figure out like, okay, what can be helpful as I prep for this, or download investor reports, things like that, and pump those in, and you can get a point of view on that too.
I'm glad you mentioned that. I feel like it's crazy to me that we're what, like 3 years into ChatGPT, more or less, and there's still a lot of reps who don't use it. One thing that I would recommend reps to do is every rep should be consuming like clinical publications on a physician. And so one thing that you can do is, you can do it from the phone or you can do it from your desktop, but go get those clinical publications, download their PDFs or get the links or whatever it might be, throw into ChatGPT. And let's say you're selling to a cardiac surgeon, you can tell ChatGPT like, hey, pretend that you're a cardiac surgeon at a top academic institution. Please read these publications and help me summarize them to prepare for my conversation with Dr. So-and-so, and it'll do that. Then you can tell ChatGPT like, can you start quizzing me at like a cardiac surgeon so I can practice having a conversation about these publications, And I think this kind of goes back to the thing that you mentioned earlier, is that one of the most important parts on enterprise sales is like what and how much you prep around,
Yep. Yeah. And I think to your point, right? The idea there is, it's not that your prospects are expecting you to be an expert, right? Like, or some sort of like thought leader, right? But the more you can sort of position yourself as a peer, like you understand them, their roles, the industry, right? The more they're going to see you as a partner, someone that can help them think through these things or come to you with questions, maybe that are even outside of like the product that you sell, right? So I love that, right? Being able to go through that and prepare better.
Yeah, something I was gonna say. On that same note, like something that we talked about earlier, and I brought up the graphic that you have, is like what's considered the status quo these days, like what's kind of table stakes, and what should sellers really be moving towards. So I'll bring that chart up in a second, but can you kind of talk to us a little bit about that?
Like the new frontier of differentiation.
Yeah, exactly. Because I think, in my opinion, a lot of sellers in my space think they're doing this like really impressive job, and then when I look at what they're doing, I'm like, this is kind of like average. Like this is like the bare minimum. It's not like really that impressive.
It's interesting. I mean, we were talking about this a little bit earlier, right? But like, the good fortune of being at Gartner and being specifically in the space that did research around like what does good B2B sales look like, is that I was a beneficiary of that research. And so one of the things that we did research on was like, how are winning companies winning? Like, what do they do differently, right? And there's this like theme that we started to recognize, which is, hey, these companies have amazing products. So everyone is touting like, we've got the latest and greatest and unique features, right? We have this best world-class product. You probably hear that all the time. We have the best product. This is world-class product, brand new product. That's great. And then the other side of the coin is, well, how are we selling that product or solution? How are we bringing that to market, right? And we've got all these like amazing sellers that come from these great pedigreed organizations, and they're killers, right? These are great salespeople. So we've got an amazing product and a great sales force. Well, guess what? Everyone else says that they have that too, right? And so no longer is it differentiated to have a great product and have a great salesperson. Like this new area of differentiation is in making it easy for your customers to buy. So like removing friction from them to be able to buy your great product from this great salesperson. And so it's all about like the buying experience that you create for your customers. That's the new like battlefield. And you're right. Like if you're in a competitive industry, you've got a salesperson, they all are going to kind of sound the same. If you're talking to 3 or 4 different potential suppliers, they're all kind of going to sound the same. So who are you going to lean towards? Well, it's the one that helps you do your job better. It's the one that helps you internally navigate, right? Talk to all the different stakeholders internally, kind of do your job for you, make your job easier. That's the one that you're like, okay, that's my partner. They made my life easier. So
yeah, I agree. And let me pull that graphic, and then Here we go. Yeah, walk us through a little bit of this. Let me zoom in like a little bit more. There we go.
Yeah. So this is basically what we were just talking about, which is like it used to be what you sell mattered, right? If you had a market leading product, and then it became how you sell, right? Matters, right? So the ones that have great
What you
products.
sell was like very much like just features and benefits. Like, our thing is faster. It's like 10% better, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, if you were the talking brochure and you were a smooth talker, great building relationships, you're gonna win, and that's great, right? But what happened over time is like products were commoditized, right? Markets flooded with all this high quality information, and thought leadership became the next like frontier, which is like great. We have this great solution set. We've got a great sales force, and now we have we've hired these industry experts to like talk about our products and solutions in the market and be thought leaders. Well, everyone else does that. And so the only new surface area for us to compete in, all the other stuff, by the way, is important. We have to do it, but it's table stakes. It's status quo, right? That now has shifted to, okay, what happens when we're not in the room? How do we help curate a buying experience that makes it easier for your customer stakeholders to make a purchase? Because they can love you all they want, but you got to help them sign the contract. You got to help them go through that purchase process.
Yeah, I completely agree with you on that note. And like something specific I want to point out here is that like as a rep, whether it's capital equipment or anything else, you really don't have control of the product you're selling. There's a lot of things you don't have control of. The one thing you do have control of is essentially the experience, even like that meeting. I wonder if you look at it the same way where I tell reps, like if you have a first meeting with a physician, like before they pay you with money, like they need to pay you with time. And so you need to somehow make that first meeting of value and interest, whether that's a combo of like they find you interesting because of things you've posted on LinkedIn, content that you've emailed them, etc., or they're just generally interested in the product or the problem. Like there's some combination there where they feel like, okay, if I carve out 30 minutes with this rep, like it'll be time well spent. So I'll learn about this product or technology or this new problem being solved in an interesting way, but also the rep is really interesting. I want to meet with them as well, and I feel like finding ways to kind of curate that experience starts the whole buying process so it's like more enjoyable versus I think a lot of reps, it's very self-motivated. Like it's all about themselves, all about like, hey, like I got a number to hit and like, following up and circling back and all these things, just like very like low value follow-up.
Yep. Yeah. And that, what is it saying? Like commission breath? Like you stink of commission breath, right?
No, I never heard of that. Can you tell me what's commission breath?
It basically is that, right? Like buyers are smart. Like your customers are smart. They can smell when like you are just in it for the deal, right? And that's why like I think it's so important on how you help them do their job internally is like such a big differentiator, right? It's not just about like your solution set, right? But it's how are you helping them, right? Do their job better, have more confidence in the decisions that they're making, right? That's a big thing, and they can see that, and it's got to be authentic, Otherwise, they're going to smell it.
And I think, like, just to kind of translate to the audience, like an example of that, of what Justin's kind of pointing out is like, I think a lot of people make this assumption that once you have a clinical champion, like a physician, surgeon, internal who's advocating for your technology, then they got it. And a lot of times, like they're busy, but they also like they've not been trained in sales. And so a lot of times I always try and make that like buying experience enjoyable for the physician, where I'll say, hey, like I know you've probably gotten products in, but I have my own process. Like let's look at the value analysis committee and figure out like if you were to rank them, who's the most influential. And so, okay, these people, and like let's figure out like what persuasion biases each one has, so that way we can bake that into your presentation, right? And so now the clinician, even if they've gotten like things in the door, they're learning a little bit about persuasion, like more of a strategic sale. And clinicians like to learn just like anybody. So now you've taken this process that they've gone through so many different times that's usually mundane and not that enjoyable, and kind of brought this novel approach where they're learning. And I think like little things like that the rep has full control of, like you can decide to make this buying experience something that's very enjoyable, and not like this needy pain, I think that's the other thing, is that there's not enough empathy sometimes on the seller side to understand, like, okay, this surgeon has like all these other priorities and competing priorities to do. Like, how do I offload some of that? How do we find like other people internally to work the deal? All those different things, versus like a lot of times they just rely solely on, like, I got this one clinical champion. What happens if they go on vacation? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. And to your point, it's like, so I've got this one clinical champion. How can I make that person the star? Right. And like arm them with the talk tracks, the presentations, the talking points, the email scripting, whatever they need internally, to your point, make movements on the value analysis committee. Like, basically you're making them the star, right? You're supporting them behind the scenes with the right content and the talking points and all of that stuff. And so
I had a random idea. I don't know why I didn't think about this before, but technically, like, the deal room that rep can develop, like on Showpad, they can technically make a deal room for a clinician, because most of the time when a clinician is thinking about adopting the technology, their thing is like, hey, I need to like share this with my partners and stuff. When I was doing deals like many years ago, I didn't have Showpad. So like for me, I had my own Google Drive folder I would make for a clinician. I'm like, hey, like, here's like a video you can show them. Here's a PDF, etc. And I would text it to them. So I'm like, hey, like, save this on your mobile phone. But technically with Showpad, like, I think that'd be very interesting, which is the rep having the ability to make their own deal room for a physician. So it's like, hey, when you go present to the head of nursing, here's your deal room for them. Here's what you can do with the VAC committee. And now you're kind of training the physician very much like a salesperson. And it just makes it a more enjoyable buying experience.
That's the whole point, right? And we see that, right, when you have a bunch of stakeholders internally that need to ultimately learn together and get onto the same page, right? It's either make a go or no go decision. That room facilitates that, not just with the content, to your point, but like the communications in there, right? Tracking the project schedule, right? All of those things. Now, again, your mobilizer or your key stakeholder can be the star of that, right? They've got everything at their fingertips to make that process easy internally. And that's how you differentiate, right? Because your competition likely may not be doing that.
Absolutely. Now, as we kind of round things out, and again, I appreciate you coming on the show. I had some like sort of fun sales questions, because like, salespeople, like we live to like go hang out at the bar, or meet up at the national sales meeting. You just hear these sort of war stories. But like, what was the most painful and maybe even embarrassing sales story that you have that changed you as a salesperson you learned from? Do you have anything that stands out? We're talking about real dumpster fire story here,
I don't, I'm going to be honest, I don't have any that are like so super painful, right? I think all of them are like learning opportunities, right? That you can learn from. I will say it's interesting. I'll just give, for if this is helpful or not to the audience, right? But like, I came from an organization in Gartner, right? That is sort of like the 800-pound gorilla in a space. And you're oftentimes competing with like status quo, right? And it's like they buy Gartner or kind of nothing, right? Moving into like more of a traditional SaaS business in Showpad, it's oftentimes we're a part of a big, usually it's competing, right? They're looking at alternatives in the market for what they're currently using to either manage and distribute content or train up their sellers and evolve them. And it's always a competitive scenario. So I would just say like learning from going from like a status quo sale to a competitive sale, which I'd imagine probably a good bit of your audience in the medtech segment are like, they're competing against other players in the market. Like the more you can, and I'll just like anchor on this, right? Differentiate that sales and buying experience is like where I would anchor on, right? That's going to be the big focus for how you win, especially now and like moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I wonder also, did you, because we also have, so it's interesting is that you kind of went from like, is Gartner Fortune 500 with it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So they're Fortune 500. So we went from Fortune 500 to Showpad, which is, it's not like I don't consider it a startup, but it is in some ways a startup. It's a smaller company.
Smaller, right?
Yeah. And so we
Billions
have,
to not billions, right?
yeah. So we have a lot of people reps who go from like a large strategic, like a J&J Medtronic, to mid-cap to startup. What was sort of the biggest change or thing that you had to adapt to as a salesperson?
Yeah, I think that the bigger thing is like there's less processes and less like formalization of best practices. And you, like the rep, and I imagine this is probably same for med dev, med tech sales reps, right? You got to corral your internal stakeholders almost as much as the external stakeholders. So like selling internally becomes like a new skill that you got to develop, right? In a bigger company, you got the brand behind you. It can help you crack open doors, spend a bit more time with clinicians, right? Smaller company, that kind of falls on you. And so you've got to move the troops internally across product, marketing, leadership. You know, you're the one that has like take the reins there. There are no like processes. Like you're the CEO of like your territory. Act as such, if you will. Like that's the big difference.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, last thing for you is like, as a sales exec, as a sales leader, continuing education is always a very important part of it. But for you, what do you do to kind of continue to sharpen your sword? There's certain books that have had an influence on your career, podcasts, courses.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, I've kind of shifted less from like sales skills. So I was definitely a beneficiary of Gartner CEB's research in there. So like big fan of the challenger sale, challenger customer, and value selling was a core component of that whole process. We follow that here at Showpad as well. So those books across value selling, challenger sale are sort of like the bedrock, right? But I've shifted more towards like business oriented podcasts and books. And so, of course I listen to this podcast, but I also listen to like things like the All In podcast, My First Million podcast, just like startup or business oriented, market oriented podcasts, that are interesting, and those types of books as well. Mostly audiobooks now, to be honest. We talked about this, we got 3 kids. So like, the time that you can invest into books now is like severely diminished. So yeah,
I know. I definitely think audiobooks and podcasts are really, really great. And I think it's important, again, going back to like using that buyer experience. I think it's good to be very well-rounded as a salesperson, to start learning from, business podcasts, reading history, all these kind of things. Cause a lot of times, like I think in any call, like sometimes with sales calls, it's like straight to business. A lot of times, like when you spend time with a prospect, like you start conversing about a variety of different things, even if it's for like a couple of minutes. And I think that people underestimate the ability to establish some authority and trust in that time, when you're able to like share some interesting thing that you read about, make a comment about certain like mainstream, topics, etc. So I think it's good as a salesperson to constantly be up to date on these things, because at the end of the day, and again, as like as much as I advocate for like modern selling and digital and everything, there's a lot of old world things that are not going away, which is like a lot of times people just want to buy from people that they personally would hang out with. You know what I mean? Like that's the thing,
right? Yeah,
that's a thing that's not going to go away. You know what I mean?
And if you're selling to whatever audience, in particular, like if you're selling to senior executives in whatever setting that may be, like those are normal people. They probably listen to some of those same like podcasts, or if they're running businesses, right? They're running hospital systems, right? These are people that like are probably listening to those types of things. And more you can shift from being a rep who just understands your product set to being a rep who understands how do businesses operate and make money and like, just function, the better you're going to be.
I totally agree. Look, me early in my career, before I moved into marketing, when I was a rep, one of the things that I was able to establish, and then sometimes some other salespeople got very jealous about this because it would be in their territory, and I didn't have control of that. But a clinician would often want to talk with me because they knew that, oh, like this one rep, Omar's really got a great background on marketing, and they would want like some advice on how they would market their practice, right? So even though that's not a product we sold, it was one other piece of value that I was able to deliver that a competitive rep did not have. And I think that, again, like, there's reps I know who, are really into fitness and used to do physical therapy. So a lot of times there's physicians like, hey, like I'm actually trying to get in better shape because like, I'm standing up in the OR, et cetera. What would you do? And so like those things do have an influence on your business, believe it or not. And so I think this goes back to the whole buying experience, which is like outside of delivering a phenomenal experience around your product and service, like how do you further enhance that just in the relationship that you have,
and add value to their day to day, right?
100%.
It gives you more surface area, right?
More, what I like that the theme there. I like that. I'm going to use that, which is how do you gain more surface area with your buyer?
Yep.
So, well, look, Justin, I really appreciate you coming on to the show. I know that you work with a lot of medtech companies and device companies for Showpad. If they want to reach out to you and learn more about the Showpad demo room, all these different things. What's the best way for them to reach you?
Yeah, I'm fairly active on LinkedIn, so feel free to follow me, add me on LinkedIn, Justin Jelley at Showpad. That's probably the best path to reach out.
Perfect. Well, look, for the audience who's listening, go give Justin a follow. If you want to learn more about Showpad, again, we don't have a lot of sponsors on the show. There's a reason why I got Showpad, just because they fit into my mission on how do we modernize and improve the way we do commercial excellence in our industry. So go to Showpad, that's showpad.com/State of MedTech. And you're going to be able to see a landing page that's specific to MedTech. You'll see a lot of great case studies, amazing companies that Showpad has helped, and you can kind of learn more about how they can help you essentially elevate your commercial excellence. So with that being said, I'm your host, Omar Khatib, and we'll see you all next time. Thanks for checking out this episode. If you want to do me a big favor and join so many other people who have helped grow this podcast, take a second and look below. If you're on Apple, give us 5 stars and write a short review. If you're on Spotify, just give us 5 stars. And if you're on YouTube, hit the like button. And most importantly, if you can, subscribe. We release so many different episodes that you may miss. Be sure to subscribe and turn your notifications on. You get extra points with me if you subscribe across all 3 channels. Thank you so much. And if you felt like this episode helped you, send this to somebody who'd really enjoy and appreciate it. Share and spread the love. We'll see you all next time.